Rushfan asks, what did disposal of unusual materials look like for MythBusters? Were there any regulations or rigorous procedures you had to follow in the aftermath of any messes you made? Every single time. A dead carcass of a body, even a pig you've bought from the butcher, is hazardous waste if you leave it by the side of the road. My favorite disposal of unusual materials was usually the stuff that we were able to pass forward that people could eat. Like when we did slipping on a banana peel, we ended up with 6 crates of bananas we didn't use. Those all immediately went to food kitchens in the Bay Area. But also, like, environmental restrictions, you know, they're stricter than you might even think. When we did, can you drop an oil slick to stop someone from following you? We were thinking, well, we're not going to use motor oil, but we could use an oil with similar properties. It's like a vegetable oil that's, you know, roughly the same viscosity, and try that. And it turned out you can't dump 20 gallons of vegetable oil on the ground or in the water table here in Northern California. We were able to get past that, specifically because the location we were filming on had the ability to route their drain to somewhere safe, actually. They had a floor drain in the track we were shooting. But yeah, what were the other things we had to get rid of? I mean, you know, for the most part, the dumps have places for you to bring that stuff. And we really, like, nothing ever got dumped down the sink on the show. Let's just say that straight up. Oh, Gwen Protheroe. I love this question. Thank you for bringing it back up again. I said in a live stream, the shop is for fast thinking and home is for slow thinking. Can I elaborate on that? I think of projects as having a timeline. I'm going to draw this left to right from your point of view. And so in the beginning of your project, for me, in the beginning of a project, there is often the shape. And my first execution of the project will be to wrap my head around its shapes. That might be by looking at 1,000 pictures of it, but it's usually by making a couple of versions here in the cave in some medium. And then once I have that shape, I take it home and I start to think about how I want to elaborate it, what I want to do. And so I do a lot of what I think of as augmented shop work at home at the end of the day. Like I'll have a construction that I'll be happy with. I don't have one right immediate here, but I'll have a construction I'll be happy with, and I'll take a picture of it just before I leave, and then I'll go home and I'll be like going through the pictures of the stuff I made. That going through the pictures, that's the slow thinking to me. That is the sort of, okay, you're building this thing, but how do you want to frame this thing? How do you want to think about this thing? It's sort of like my dad, when he painted, was all about, I mean, like any visual artist, the formal layout of his painting. And he wanted to see that formal layout in abstract a way as possible. What does that mean? Well, so a graphic, if you've ever done any kind of graphic design, you know this procedure of like, you lay out the text, the first pass of the text, and you kind of blur your eyes and you're like, oh, now I gotta make that smaller, make that bigger. That blurring of the eyes, that to me is the abstraction of the formal elements. That's the kind of looking at them from a distance. And my dad would do this, like, he'd hold up a mirror and he'd look at the painting in a mirror. Or he'd walk to the other end of the shop and he'd put the mirror up and he'd back up and he'd keep on like looking at his painting from farther. He'd put his painting upside down and look at its formal layout that way. So to me, when I go home and I take pictures of stuff and I go home, that's part of me sort of also looking at the, it's my version of the mirror to a certain extent. I use my notes-taking app to do a lot of research on the projects that I'll attack in the morning. I don't love surfing the web for research here in the cave. It just doesn't, like, I don't like opening a computer here if I'm not using it actively. And surfing the web, you're like, I've said this before, like, I can't just check my phone at the workbench and be like, I literally have to like go sit in this chair. If I'm out there looking at my phone, I just feel weird. It doesn't feel right. Yeah, it feels kind of strange. Mark C9G actually has an interesting question about high definition. With today's high definition, is model making harder to do? This is a lovely question because the answer isn't quite what you think it is. So the question is, with today's high definition 4K, 8K televisions, everything's close up, everything's up-resed for the sports people. Can I say how difficult it is to buy new televisions and detune them so that old movies look just normal on them? Like it's a whole thing that we go through here when we obtain new televisions. You have to undo them. But anyway, does high definition make model making harder to do? Now the implication here is that it makes model making harder to do because you have to put in more attention to detail that you wouldn't normally. That's semi-true. Fawn Davis has this very funny way of describing how much film obscures just by being film. He's like, take a look at it and then do this. Does it still look good? Then it's going to look good on film. Like at 24 frames per second on the film grain, on a big screen, things get soft. Things get slightly blurry. You have a lot of latitude. And so the implication of your question is that making models for 8K, 4K, big high definition stuff is harder because you have to spend more time doing the detail. But and actually, I want to point out, I love pointing out that I think that Weta Workshop is one of the few places that didn't really have to change their workflow for HD because they were already putting in that much detail. That being said, they had, I think, 3 different dwarf facial appliques for the actors on The Hobbit, depending on what season of the year they were filming in, because what they learned on The Hobbit, taking careful color pictures and documenting how they were going, is that our natural pallor changes over the course of a year. And so they adjusted their makeup and the colors they were putting into their prosthetic appliances on the dwarves depending upon the season that it was. That is, I guarantee you, that's 100% an HD problem. But it's not like a model takes 1,000 hours to do right, or for a professional it takes 100 hours to do right, and now you go HD, oh, it's going to take 120 hours. It doesn't quite work like that because there's no scale about when you're done. One of the things, if you get a lot of work as a model maker in the film industry, one of the reasons you are getting work is because you understand the prioritization between perfection and getting it done, and you know where to save time and resources in order to deliver the thing by Tuesday. The beginning model maker doesn't know how to do that. That's why they can clear coat a car, let it sit for 2 weeks while that paint job gets nice and hard, and then go and do their detailing. In film, you have a matter of hours, not weeks. So the job in making stuff for film, not just model makers, but prop people, set deck, all of that, costume, the process is you're never going to make the thing exactly how it needs or wants to be. You're going to make it as good as you can given your budget, your time, and what film will see. And knowing that is your professional institutional experience. So it's just like you just change. It's not like you've moved the mark so HD, everything has to get more detailed, and that means I have to work that much harder. That actually means that I'm probably finding some other efficiencies in the beginning so I can spend more time on that last step, really, truly. Legendary model maker Greg Gian, an amazing collector, amazing maker, worked on Star Trek, worked on a lot of really important films, worked with a lot of really good friends of mine over the years. I was never able to meet him. Although I did make a mold of one of his models for Galoob Toys. He and I and a few other people, John Duncan, Dave Fogler, were making prototypes for Galoob for their micro machines in like 01 or something. And they needed molds made. And so each of us was making our molds. And Greg Gian had another job. And so I took over making the molds for the Chicken Walker prototype he'd made for them. And handling his model parts up close was so fascinating because it was totally different than my style of model making. It was crunchy, up close. It was crunchy. That's the best way I can describe it. It was like rough around every edge. But that was like from here. And then from here, it looked perfect. And it was like, man, he is finding efficiencies I don't know anything about. And I remember specifically like John Duncan, who built the Razor Crest built the Razor Crest. That's all I need to say. John Duncan called me up at that time. He's like, hey, are you working with Greg's model? Tell me what you think. Tell me what you notice. And I'm like, it's really crunchy. He's like, I know. And we talked about how Greg Gian really understood at this amazing level exactly what the camera would see. And he didn't do any more work than that, which was a real education to me. So, yeah, I think in some ways HD can make things more difficult, but it's much more in the makeup range than it is in the prop range. These actors, their faces are filling an IMAX screen, so of course you're going to see every little thing. And makeup in the film industry has commensurately gotten astoundingly great. Makeup artists are winning Academy Awards now for their work, and that is right and true. Because the work that they have done over the course of film, you know, starting with the earliest ones, and sorry, my brain is forgetting all of the important makeup artists in my head right now. But just to say that it's less of a model making problem than I think a makeup problem. All right. Thank you for watching. I wanted to talk to you about Tested membership. The Tested members are a key community that we find really, really remarkable. That's very separate from Tested and from YouTube. The Tested members, they buy each other memberships during our live streams. So if you're wondering whether to become a member, watch one of our live streams and someone may just give you one. It is hard to overestimate how much the Tested members actually make possible on this channel. They give us a lot of wiggle room. They give us a huge amount of feedback.
That's a member right now.
Thank you so much for enjoying your membership. Link in the description for everything you need to know. And for all the members out there, thank you, thank you, thank you.